Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Brown. I'm a solutions architect here at Endor Labs. And in the previous video, we talked about designing your software, right? So we've done our planning, gotten our requirements from the business or the client. We've built a blueprint for that in the design phase. Now we're going to transition and kind of from design to actually coding, putting our hands on the keyboard, and we're going to make this blueprint a reality. So this of itself could be a semester long course in a graduate school program, but we're going to try to fit it in this little introduction, right? So a few things to keep in mind. We don't want to do everything all at once and try to just tackle it all with one team, right? Like any kind of problem you have in life where you're trying to figure something out, how to fix a broken pipe or how to fix a problem. But the key thing is here is that you want to break things down into very manageable units, break down those problems so you can solve them. Coding guidelines is a big one. So really the main purpose of a coding guideline is to really just ensure that the code is consistent throughout the project, throughout the application. So we'll talk a little bit and expand a little bit more on that, but coding guidelines are super duper important for a bunch of different reasons, which we'll talk a little bit about. We're then going to talk more about how does open source play into all this, into the SDLC during the development phase. We'll talk about things like version pinning. Why is that important to sticking to certain dependency versions? We'll talk about integration testing, putting this into the CI, making sure that things work really well, and we'll take it from there. Let's really talk about transitioning from the design phase into the development phase. So we built this blueprint in the design phase of, all right, here's our architecture, here are the languages we're going to use, here's why we're going to use them. What we want to do is take this blueprint and make it real. And we want to start implementing these things, whether that's acquiring certain cloud providers or that's acquiring certain paid services like maybe IDEs or making sure you pick the right database and confirming that throughout. So you want to do this in a collaborative environment. Obviously, you want to start to assign tasks, and something to use here is, and I think this is pretty obvious, some kind of project management tool, right? First thing that comes to mind with a lot of people is Jira. It's super robust. You can assign certain tickets, assign certain tasks, do all of that, right? Sometimes if it's maybe you're just starting out, it's a certain application that uses only a few languages, it's not terribly complex. Or if you're just making a solo project, honestly, you could probably just get away with using your source code management tool, something like a GitHub or a GitLab. A lot of the capabilities of assigning issues or assigning tickets, assigning these tasks, doing collaborative work together, a lot of this is already baked into the software, to the source code management tool you use, your repository. When you start to get more complex, it's pretty hard to do that. So something like a Jira or a Linear to really help you assign those tasks, break down those projects, pick certain people or certain teams to do different things. Another really good thing you could put on the coding guidelines are things like commenting. How are we going to comment? You say we don't need to comment that much. It's better to properly document these things and to explain what is this code actually doing, because not everybody stays at the same company for 20 odd years and can explain what's going on. So that kind of like that tribal knowledge of, oh yeah, I wrote this 3 years ago. Here's what's going on. If you don't put the comments there, somebody new is going to join and say, how does this thing actually work specifically? So it's gonna be able to take a lot of that confusion out. It's a lot of code formatting, naming conventions. How are we going to name variables? We want to name them in a way that makes sense to our application with our context here. How do we comment and how are we going to document a lot of the things we do in the code? How do we handle errors? Are we going to explicit is better than implicit, right? We want to raise meaningful errors. We want to be able to describe what's actually happening and really put a list of best practices in those coding guidelines so that you can reuse code more effectively. There's a lot less confusion as to what certain parts of the application is doing. So coding guidelines are super, super important. And it will depend again on the language that you're using and how you're implementing that and things like that. So that's a very brief overview of just development specifically, but let's take a deeper look into how does open source play into all this, play into the development role of the life cycle. So in the planning and the design phase, we picked our languages for certain front end or the back end, things like that. And we researched, okay, these are the kind of package managers or the dependency management tools that we're implementing and how we're going to use them. Before I get into that, what is a dependency management tool? So even before I get into that, let's look at how dependencies are even declared, right? How do we know what dependencies we're using? Okay, I need something to do this. I know that exists out there. Where do I indicate that we're using that? Where do I actually implement that? There are these things called manifest files, okay? And they're going to be called different things depending on what the package manager is, what the language is, all of that. So these manifest files where you're actually declaring your components and what versions they use. Even in this specific area of the entire development phase in the entirement SDLC is super important. And what these manifest files show is here's the component and here's the version of that component. Now you'll see that there are some that don't have numbers. And for example, this is a requirements.txt in Python. This uses the package manager. This application can use the package manager, PyPy, pip, poetry, things like that to really manage the dependencies. It is what it sounds like, right? So I have my manifest file here declaring the components and their versions. And this will look very different depending on the language and package manager. So this is where they are. This is where they're declared. How are they built? How do they tie together? Why is a dependency management tool so important? This can get really complicated really quickly with transitive dependencies, especially. One version 8 layers deep could be relying on another version 12 layers deep at a certain version range or number. And if one updates to a version that is not nearly supported enough by another one or isn't supported at all by another one, it could break the entire application. Dependency management tools help solve for that problem. And depending on how complex the application is, there are different ones that you could use. So like the very kind of standard ones, like for Python, like I mentioned, poetry, py, pip, things like that. For .NET, this is an example of a CS proj. That's an example of a manifest file for .NET. You could also make lock files, which we'll talk about in a second. They use NuGet. The .NET C#, a very popular one is NuGet. JavaScript, you have a package.json. You could also generate a package lock.json. Like I said, we'll talk about lock files in a second. It can use NPM. It could use Yarn. There's new ones out like Bun. That's a super new one that just came out recently. That's the other thing. These package managers, there's new ones that come out every so often. But for example, NPM, you could use NPM with TypeScript or JavaScript, something like that. Java, there's typically Maven is a very popular one. There's also things like Gradle, which we can talk about in a second. And with something like Ruby, you could use something like Bundler. This is a gem file. They use what are called gems. You can see how very complex it can get very quickly. But the thing to remember about dependency management tools and package managers is that they help you manage your dependencies in your packages. So those are the very common ones. There are more complex ones, like I said, Gradle, for example, that works really well with Java, Kotlin for Android applications. But you could do a lot more with Gradle. It helps you build the application, manage the packages, obviously. You can make it super customizable. So you have in the build process certain scopes that developer could want to happen or not want to happen at certain stages. There's something like Bazel, which was invented by Google, that really helps a lot with like things like very large monorepos, for example, where there's just a ton of different languages and there's a ton of different components everywhere. Bazel is a really powerful tool to help you contain all of that, to help you manage those dependencies and manage your application in the build process. So dependency management tool, obviously very crucial and very key to allowing you to manage your dependencies that can get really complex really quickly. Some other kind of best practices for dependencies are things like version pinning. So version pinning is when you specifically say, hey, package manager, or hey, requirements.txt in Python, only use a version of equal to 0.31.0. And this is very common version pinning. But again, it depends on the language and package manager. So something like Python, it's a very Pythonic way to have the latest and greatest dependencies inside of your application. They very much so say, hey, just use the latest version. Just that's what they call it, the Pythonic way, right? The best practices for Python. You could use something, and you could see here, okay, use maybe this version, but with this specific, with at least 0.9.0, but no less than version 10. There's a lot of different nuances you could do with something like package.json with npm. You could do semantic versioning. These little carets here mean that, hey, I'll match any minor version or patch version above 2.6.7, but below 3.0.0. That's what these like little carets mean in this version of node fetch, right? There's a lot of different things you can do to tell the package manager specifically what you want it to do, but these are things you've thought about in the design phase, that you put in the coding guidelines. Hey, we're going to pin our dependencies. Always pin the dependencies to a certain version. We don't want to do major version changes. It's another big thing. If you just put, for example, this right here with no version next to it, it's just going to use the latest version. Now, if you're super tightly following kind of Python design, that may be okay. But typically, if let's say today it's 1.0 and then the maintainer releases version 2.0, that could introduce a huge major breaking change. Hopefully it doesn't, but definitely could. That could break everything else. So you just really want to make sure you're documenting. This is just an example of an open source application. There's some notes here. Set these versions together to avoid request dependency warning. A lot of different things that you could do to essentially tell the package manager, hey, please follow these guidelines that we've gone ahead and implemented in the step prior. This is how we want to go ahead and manage these dependencies. What's really good about it is that it's good for like code reuse. It's good to just make sure there's not an incredible amount of breaking change, right? So continuous integration, or CI, as you'll sometimes hear it referred. You could hear it referred to as like the build step in the pipeline. Hey, I'm going to install my dependencies. I'm going to make sure that certain versions are compatible with other versions. I'm going to make sure these third-party libraries and tools, they're going to work correctly within my applications. So there are a bunch of best practices you can follow. So there's obviously picking the dependencies. We've already covered that in the design phase, and we've been working on that throughout the development phase. Things like using version control, like version pinning. We want to integrate incrementally. So it's not like, all right, let's just implement and take all of those components that we saw when I was sharing my screen a second ago and just install them all at once. Let's do this incrementally. Again, little chunks that we want to solve, and then that solves the bigger problem, or that completes the bigger task, right? Obviously using package managers. And then when we actually go ahead and test, we want to do things like automated testing. Are we using and doing like environment isolation, right? Are we using like virtual environment for Python? Are we using containers to ensure that the dependencies for different projects don't conflict with one another, right? It's simpler if you go ahead and install dependencies locally on your laptop and then you try to build an application, it doesn't work. And it's probably because you have these built on your laptop. You should probably use a container or a virtual environment, something like that. Use things like Hub Actions, Jenkins, TeamCity, GitLab CI, all of those to really make sure that you're automatically testing your code whenever changes are made. A really good one is to test in a kind of a mirrored environment of your prod environment, right? This is typically referred to as something like staging, where it's like the part right before production. You should test in there. It's a really good place to test because you're not messing with prod, but you're going to be testing in an environment that mirrors production. Then there's a lot of other ones, right? Do your performance testing, do monitor for deprecated features, security scans, which we'll talk about. This all falls into the integration portion of taking your open source components that you've written locally or that you're going to put in a container or build, testing those dependencies, making sure everything works, reviewing them, and then moving on from there, right? So really, what did we talk about in this video? We talked about some of the best practices for the development phase within the SDLC, talked about how complicated it can get just generally, but especially within open source. Talked about how open source gets implemented into the development phase within the SDLC, that you should definitely use a package manager. There's some scenarios with which you can't, with some certain languages and certain frameworks, things like that. I completely understand that, but where possible, definitely use a package manager. It's going to help you out. How are you going to version these components out? Are you just going to use the latest and greatest? Or are we going to specify certain versions with something like version pinning? How do we test these components? Where should they be tested? What pipeline? Which environment should they be tested in? What are we looking for? How compatible or incompatible are they? There's a lot of things to go over and discuss, but this was a very high-level overview of the development phase within the SDLC. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.